Welcome to Hotline TV, everybody. I'm John Mercurio.
And I'm Sean Sullivan, filling in for Amy Walter.
Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Sean Sullivan is our resident Lone Star State expert. So today we thought we would talk about the Texas gubernatorial primary, which is just a few days, just a few hours, if you will.
I've already started a countdown.
I know, I'm excited. People are actually already voting in Texas in this primary. So let's talk first of all about the primary that's drawing all the attention these days. Of course, I'm talking about the Republican primary between incumbent Governor Rick Perry, incumbent Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, and this woman named Medina, that Funky Cole Medina.
Funky Cole Medina, yes, who has developed into quite a factor.
What's going to happen? Tell us what's going to happen over the next couple of days in this race.
Well, I mean, so far the race has been characterized by a really expensive ad war. Hutchison and Perry seem to release new ads almost every few days. And so going into the final stretch here, it's going to be expensive. They're going to release more ads. Hutchison is going to continue her line of attacking Perry's incumbency, saying that he's been around Texas too long. And Perry's going to have the consistent refrain of, you know, Hutchison is beholden to Washington. She's all about earmarks. She's out of touch with Texans. And I think we'll see more of the same.
Let's take a look.
Into the stretch.
Let's take a look at some of these ads right now.
Ethical clouds, cronyism. That's what newspapers are saying about Rick Perry. Arrogance, bully tactics, not a bully pulpit. False fiscal conservatism, playing politics with our universities. Boondoggles on toll roads, rewarding supporters, punishing opponents, mandating HPV vaccine for girls. That's why almost every major newspaper endorses Kay Bailey Hutchison, a courageous visionary fueled by conservative principles. It's time for Perry to go.
Before Senator Hutchison voted for the $700 billion Wall Street bailout, she voted for billions in taxpayer-funded earmarks. That's why a Texas newspaper dubbed her the Queen of Earmarks. She spent billions on projects like the World Toilet Summit, fruit fly research in France, a teapot museum in North Carolina, and $50 million on an indoor rainforest in Iowa. She kept spending and spending. Billions of tax dollars. Senator Hutchison, voting with Washington since 1993.
So just like you said, you can see in the Perry ad, for example, called The Queen, I mean, it really sort of encapsulates what you were just saying about how the Perry campaign is trying to attack Hutchison.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the interesting thing is, you know, both sides have had a fairly consistent way of attacking the other side. I mean, Hutchison has kept her same line on Perry. Perry's kept his same line on her. But the difference is Perry's line of attack seems to be sticking more with voters. The fact that she's beholden to Washington, that seems to be sticking more than the, you know, anti-incumbency line of attack that Hutchison's been using. Even
though he's been, he's refused to say he won't actually run again in 2014. So he's actually talking about the possibility of not just being the longest Texas-serving governor, but, you know, a 4 or 5 termer.
He could be going for any number of records.
Yeah, so it looks as though at this point he's the front runner, and that's exactly what Democrats want. In fact, you and I sat down on Monday with former Houston Mayor Bill White, the likely Democratic nominee. Let's move into a discussion about the Democratic primary. Of course, what did White have to say? Not so much about his primary, where he's likely to win by a large margin, but about the general election, where he's likely to face Perry.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, over the course of the primary, he hasn't been challenged as much as Perry or Hutchison have. He's up against Farouk Shami, a lesser-known candidate. He's, you know, had his own problems, so he's been able to focus the majority of his attacks on Rick Perry, which is sort of what he continued to do in the interview yesterday. You know, saying it's a similar line to what Hutchison uses, which is, you know, he's been around too long. He's not in touch with the needs of Texans. He's messed up on transportation, on issues of border security or immigration. And so we've already seen White sort of starting that, and I think, you know, you'll see a continuation of that if Perry is able to make it into the general election, and if he is as well.
Which, I mean, again, it seemed like White was assuming he is, because when we sort of pressed White to talk about what kind of race he would run against Hutchison, he had no interest whatsoever in doing that. He's already sort of going for the Hutchison support, the block of support that she gets, trying to sort of cater to them. You know, I think it's an open question as to whether or not Hutchison actually endorses Perry. She said she will, I think, but I mean, the campaign has been so negative. So clearly you have Democrats already trying to go for her supporters, which is sort of an interesting dynamic for people on the Republican side who were listening to that debate. That could actually help Hutchison a little bit.
I think that's exactly right, and I think that, you know, it's interesting if the Republican race ends up going to a runoff, and the race gets extended, you know, the primary's next week, but if there's a runoff, it'll be in April. Presuming that White makes it to the general election, he'll have another 6 weeks, you know, with virtually nobody attacking him. He won't have a Democratic candidate attacking him, and the two Republicans will be attacking each other. So.
Right. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that general election. Perry versus White. What happens?
Well, one of the things that White mentioned in the interview yesterday was immigration and border security. I think we're going to see a lot of this play out in the general election. This is a theme that Perry has already made a big issue in his race with Hutchison. He's called for, you know, drones to patrol the border, and he's you know, asking the federal government to pitch in. They're both sort of anti-federal government when it comes to border security. I think we'll see White attack Perry for having, you know, the wrong approach to border security, the wrong approach to immigration, and you know, for White, he hasn't really been tested yet by any big name candidates. So once Perry starts running ads, you know, on immigration and stuff, I think that we'll start to get a better feel for how that dynamic is going to play out.
Interesting. Good stuff. All right, final words. Someone we haven't talked about, but someone who is residing in Texas these days himself, George W. Bush. It's a name we're starting to hear a little bit more of over the past couple of weeks. Republicans, increasingly confident about 2010 and potentially 2012, are starting to revisit and revive the Bush political brand. Last words, final question to you, George Bush branding. Is it okay for Republicans to embrace him and his legacy again in 2010? Yes or no?
I think, you know, yes. I think that, you know, we've seen with Mitch Daniels sort of not ruling out a potential run in 2012. He's sort of, that OMB, Bush OMB stigma is not sticking perhaps as much as it once was. And White, in our interview, you know, he's a Democrat, but he didn't really have anything bad to say about Bush.
Well, right, but I think White's from Texas, so, you know, he's, as even a Democrat from Texas, is likely to be at least somewhat kid gloves with Bush. I'm going to say no. I'm going to disagree with you because I honestly think the reason that Bush has increased slightly, and I do mean by 1 or 2 points in recent polls in terms of his favorable rating, is only because he's been out of view. I mean, this is someone who I think really, the more people start to see him, the more they're reminded of his 8 years in office, the more that they're reminded of the legacy and the obvious economic and foreign policy problems that existed in his final term, and the more I think his numbers could plummet once again. So he's out of sight, out of mind, and that helps him, but it doesn't help Republicans if he does come back. That's my long-winded answer to the yes or no question. But I'm sorry, we're out of time for today. Thank you so much, Sean Sullivan, for joining. This is Sean's, I was going to say your virgin, but I think I'll call it your maiden visit,
voyage.
your maiden voyage on Hotline TV. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Until next time, we'll see you on Hotline TV.